Wood. She's the Executive Director for the Office of English Learners. We have Juan Seda. He started in July with our Office of English Learners. He is a director. We got him from the Tampa area, so he's been a great addition to our staff. Excited that you'll be able to hear from him today. We also have Debbie McAdams. She's our Executive Director of Exceptional Education here. And then Ty Hodak will also be presenting. So again, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to them so we can get right into the content. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you for inviting us this afternoon. We actually are going to be standing together because we really want to show this collaboration. We've been doing a lot of work together across our departments and across curriculum instruction. And you'll see that cross as we talk about the work that we're doing. Let's start off with the mission and vision of the Office of English Learners. The EL team will support the English learners with the social, emotional, cultural, linguistic, and academic skills necessary to excel in higher education work and life. So this table that you see here really highlights the growth that we've seen across the district this past year. So last January we presented, and since January we've seen an increase of 2,523 active English learners all across the county. That's now, active English learners are now 19% of MNPS. Active EL students receive EL instruction every day from an EL teacher for 1 to 2 hours, and then the remainder of the day they're spent with content teachers. Transitional students are the students that have exited the program within the last 4 years, transitional 1 to 4, and though we have around 6,000 transitional students, they're not receiving services every day, but we're still monitoring their progress in core content areas. The limited English proficient category is the subgroup that as a district we're held accountable for. That includes both active and transitional students. This subgroup is now 26% of MNPS. So that's why this presentation is really so important. So as our goal for literacy for English learners is that we increase the percentage of English learners who meet or exceed their academic growth projections in literacy to 60% by May 2020. With this growing population, this is something that we're really working together as a team to do. In order to meet this KPI, we must ensure that all 16,521 students have equal access to grade level content and standards across all content areas. This is the key to the literacy improvement for English learners in MNPS. I'm going to dig a little bit more into the data so you can understand the why before we get into some of our action steps.
Molly, before you go on, I have a question about the active English language learners currently receive English language services. How much, is that daily? How many hours a day?
So it is daily. It is a daily requirement, and it's between 1 hour and 2 hours a day. We do have a small pocket of students that are in our SIFE population that are in an EL classroom all day long, but the majority of our students are 1 to 2 hours a day with an EL teacher that is teaching ELA content and language at the same time. We're actually, Juan in a couple slides is going to tell you a little bit more about what that looks like in all the different models, because it's very different across the district. And so it just varies based on what school and how many students are there. So we wanted to show this one in particular because it shows the population growth across the K-12 perspective. This data I want to take note though is from October 2018 count to October 2019 count. So that's why you see a little difference from the first slide, because the first slide is our January count. What I want you to notice would be the color cohorting there. So that's where you can see kindergartners that are now moved in first grade and so on. You can see that all grade levels have grown. An interesting one that I want you to look at closely is the 9th grade. You see that our 9th grade class has more growth than other class and also is one of the largest classes in high school. This is because of the high number of newcomers that we receive, and when a student comes in and does not have transcripts, so they don't have any classes, core classes on their transcripts, they are coded as a 9th grader. Whether they're 15 or they're 17, they become a 9th grader. So that's where you see that increase there. Another highlight that we want to point out is that we do expect to see a decline in the number of students that are exiting the program this year, for 2 different reasons. One, the state just changed the exit criteria, increased the exit criteria for English learners. So we will have more students that would have exited, but will not because the criteria has increased for them. 2, with the significant number of newcomers that we've seen at the lower levels of language, they're going to take time to exit. So that'll impact our overall growth, the number of students that are meeting and exiting the program. This data up here is also broken down by quadrant. So when I've thought of this, I thought what we'd see first was, okay, the Southeast quadrant is the one where we've seen the most new students this year, new English learners. And this has always been the case for quite a long time. But if you take a look here, the Northwest quadrant is actually the one that has seen the most new English learners to that quadrant. Southeast still is the one that holds the most English learners, but the Northwest is the one where we've seen the most growth. I think this is important to highlight because our district is now growing and we have to support students all across the district. So that's why when we talk about collaborating with the content areas, that is so important because the EL office has a very small staff. So we have to build capacity of literacy coaches, deans, and all kinds of different stakeholders to be able to help our populations all across Davidson County. This is a slide that you've seen before, but I just wanted to bring it back up. This is the access test. Every year, English learners take a test that tests their language proficiency, and it's actually coming up, and it starts in February. We saw a slight increase last year of students that met this target. We are held accountable as a district for 2 things, their language growth and also how well they're doing in content areas as well. In order for a student to really be successful on TNReady, they have to be proficient in English. So we really focus in on helping them meet those targets and also exiting the program. You'll see at the third row down there, that's the one we were saying that might go down based on the high level of newcomers that we received and also the exit criteria going up. This slide in particular is important to celebrate because we know that once our English learners reach English proficiency, they are performing well on TNReady. So you can see here in the first row, those are active English learners and how they're performing on TNReady. The students are not proficient in English yet, so that's going to show students that are at levels 1 in their language proficiency, all the way to a student that's more proficient. Once a student exits the program, though, that's the key time where we really should see students meeting expectations in the sense of TNReady, and our transitional students are actually outperforming other students in the district. So that's really something to celebrate. This really speaks to 2 things. It speaks to the high aptitude of our English learner population to succeed in our classrooms. It also speaks to the strong EL and literacy instruction that those students have received as they were growing in their English language and are now proficient. So Juan is next up. He's going to speak a little bit about how we are currently working to meet the district's literacy curriculum by providing equitable access across all of our classes.
Good afternoon. So our goal is to increase the percentage of English learners who meet or exceed the academic growth projections in literacy to 60% by May of 2020. In order to meet this literacy KPI, we must ensure that English learners have equal access to grade-level literacy content and standards across all content areas. We are ensuring that equal access to grade-level literacy content and that EL students make language and literacy growth through the individual learning plans, or ILPs. This is a required report by the state of Tennessee as of August of 2018. But beyond the compliance aspect of it, the ILP supports English learners in meeting literacy KPI by incorporating English learners' language development in a classroom and build content teachers' capacity to scaffold their instruction. ILPs provide ELA support and other content teachers with specific language supports and strategies to provide equal access to the core instruction. Improving EL instruction, we use the IOPs, we use the IOP along with the practices with the Council of Great City Schools, professional development for ELA, EL, and also the content teachers, which includes math, science, social studies. The PD with the Council of Great City Schools is grounded in the research of EL experts such as Lily Wong Fillmore and Marianne Cucciara. The PD highlights the effective literacy practices for English learners that are the same as those for all students, and the work that we do with literacy directly aligns with the district literacy model. The key to effective literacy instruction for English learners is providing additional research-based language support to the core curriculum, explicit instruction in receptive and expressive language skills, and increasing academic conversations using language structures and vocabulary. The professional development directly aligns with the district literacy approaches for all learners and provides language development strategies to incorporate classroom literacy instruction. This other slide presents the EL service models that we use in MNPS. So in order for EL students to make progress in language development and literacy, English learners must have equal access to grade level content and standards through daily EL instruction. Core instructions for EL includes EL supports based on the student's language proficiency level. Because of the diversity in our English learners, we have a variety of service models across, as you can see from the slide. The EL service models are designed to accelerate language development while students are accessing grade level content in all subject areas, math, science, social studies, and others as well. Through these models, EL and content teachers can work in collaboration to ensure that students are receiving the same core lessons along with explicit language instruction.
All right. I want to re-emphasize what Juan just stated about our literacy practices for English learners. These effective practices for English learners are the same as those for all students. And so we are always kind of keeping that message at the forefront of our teachers so they understand that we want to make sure that equal access is there. Recent research from Dr. Lily Wong Fillmore and Dr. Goldenberg emphasizes that in addition to these high-quality literacy practices for all students, there are some things that English learners do require in their instruction. We have to make sure that they have equal access to the core instructional materials through language supports specific to their language domain. We have to explicitly focus on oral language and productive language so that we're able to grow our English learners in all four modalities of their language. And the teachers must provide specific feedback based on those language domains and needs that they have. So those are the differences when it comes to the instruction that we would give English learners during that specific ELD time. So what are our next steps in meeting our goals of increasing the percentage of English learners who meet and exceed their academic growth projections in literacy? Over the next year, we must continue to ensure that core instruction using those individual learning plans is implemented specifically in those ELA classes, but across all content areas. That ILP is really our lever of change, and that's something that we need our teachers to be executing and using and following. We need to increase our collaboration with C&I and all of the departments to make sure that our scope and sequence documents and other curriculum materials specifically include language supports for English learners. So if you're that English 1 teacher, you know what you need to be doing for an English learner because that's there for you. When we are modeling lessons and planning from the literacy coach, building level coach perspective, those coaches need to be able to give specific strategies that highlight language instruction. That's something we're not there yet. We're working together to do that, but that is definitely a goal for us in the current year to make sure that's happened, to build their toolbox. Specific to ELA professional development coming out of the curriculum instruction team, we are delivering EL-specific content to those coaches through the literacy coach days so that we're able to build their toolbox. But also when they are delivering professional development to content teachers specifically, and EL teachers too, we are ensuring that content that they're delivering includes EL strategies. Because we don't want it to be, this is what the EL office does, this is what it does in the ELA department, because if they don't see the alignment right there when they're sitting there in that session, it's too disconnected. And it shouldn't be, because you got to be able to attend that PD and be able to meet the needs of all students, not have to say, well, you have to go to a separate PD at the EL office to do that. Also, when our literacy coaches and when our EL coaches are in planning sessions, we need to be able to speak to teachers about what is that planning session, what does that planning look like for English learners when you're looking at a text, and then be able to provide the teachers with specific feedback on their lessons. That's a goal for us when it comes to that literacy coach that are in those buildings. We have a wide range of skill set right now. We want to make sure they feel confident with that. They've given us feedback that they need help there, and we want to make sure we're able to give them what that language instruction should look like across the day. In the next 3 years, we plan to expand outside of just that ELA literacy coach perspective. Literacy happens across content areas, so we need to make sure that if you're teaching literacy through math, through science, through social studies, you also have that toolbox of what are those specific language instruction tools that you should be using. We also really need to ensure that all teachers, including our EL teachers, are utilizing the district's curriculum to make sure that they're receiving the same thing as the native speaking student across the hallway from them. That's our job. We have to ensure that. If we don't do that, we're continuing to widen the gap by giving them something different. We also really need to provide teachers, all teachers, training in culturally responsive practices. Those practices that are specific to language acquisition and the EL students' countries of origin and how that transfers to where they are now. We really want teachers to feel better prepared to meet the literacy needs of English learners. In order to do that, they have to understand the backgrounds of students as well. If we do these action steps over the next year and over the next 3 years, we will see English learners meet the district's KPI in literacy. So what can the board do to help?
Bring it full circle.
All right. So we have seen a student increase. And with a student increase as significant as the one that we've seen, we will need to increase the amount of money in the student-based budget for EL teachers. And this will be about $1.5 million for EL teachers to make sure that our district, number one, stays in compliance with state policy at a 1:35 ratio. And number two, make sure that wherever a student lives in Davidson County, you have that high quality EL instruction. In the future, we need additional funding for EL certifications for our current English and math teachers in particular. We have teachers in MNPS that want an EL endorsement, but right now they have to fund it themselves, and we have to say to that person, I'm sorry, but if you contact local universities, they give you a discount. We do not have any funding right now in our budget to do that. With a sizable population of 26% of our district, we should, in the future, think about how we are going to grow our own teachers versus every year trying to find new teachers with an EL endorsement. We need to continue to advocate at the state level for a language-based math course for newcomers. Right now, English learners get 2 years before they take an English course. So that gives them 2 years to grow their language before they're in an English course that's tested, English 1, 2, 3. There is not that for math. And so right now, a newcomer of all the students that we just got that are ninth graders, they are in integrated 1 math with a native speaking peer who may have been in school since they were in kindergarten.
Is that true across the state?
Well, okay, so it's across the state, yes. And so if we were to put them in another course, so if we wanted to put them in a language-based course right now, we would have them, it would be an elective, and they'd have to double up in a math class later on, which is really not setting them up for success in the sense of that graduation timeline.
So is this a state board decision or state department decision? State board, no?
It will eventually be state board.
Uh-huh.
This is similar to the recommendation when we presented last fall. That's the
Yep. So do you have a sample, like, sequence from another state that you could share that we could?
Yes. David and I have actually this was the one, when we talk to high school principals, this is the thing. That is the hardest thing for them to do and watch, is for when you have a newcomer that doesn't necessarily qualify for SIFE because they have been in school, having to place that student in an integrated 1 class is the toughest thing that they do. And so when I was preparing for this, that was one of the things they said. If you could help us with that, that is so hard. Because what happens is, if they don't pass that, then you're already off track because you've got 4 years of math that you're taking, then you're doubling up later on, and you're at the lower levels of English anyway. So it's already kind of setting you up, not setting you up for success. And so looking at that, how could we help support? We have 30% of the English learners, 30 to 33% usually in Davidson County of English learners in Tennessee. So if we want this to happen, we need to be the ones that are.
What percentage of those are in high school, would you say?
I don't know that off the top of my head.
Well, I
can
guess
tell
like
you.
this other graph with your table over here.
Yeah, we could look at it that way. The high school population is the one that's been growing the most. And that's actually the hardest one that it is to staff when it comes to EL teachers.
The assumption is that math is a universal language, and they assume that you can just look at a formula and decipher it, lack of a better word or a better phrasing. Is that why it's done?
I don't know why they've chosen to do that in particular. I just honestly think they haven't really even thought about it in the sense of the math progression. That would be my guess.
Don't think about math as literal.
They probably just thought about the English progression for high school. They never really took into consideration the math. And our state has always been a growing EL population, but we haven't seen the growth that we've seen this year. So I have a kind of a weekly call that I have with other districts that have growing populations, Memphis, Shelby, and they're all seeing similar thoughts around the math piece. Some of them are offering the elective course, but are only doing it when students need it because it sets them off track. We do that as well. We do that for SIFE students. SIFE students take an elective math, but we're really cautious there because if you're taking all electives as a ninth grader, how is that helping you graduate? It makes it really difficult for you because it doesn't give you as much flexibility later on.
So am I hearing that EL math teachers are different than the traditional math teachers? So they're the same?
They're the same.
So that means that we're short how many math teachers across this district?
I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah. So we need math teachers, period, right?
We need math teachers, period. And so what we can do, though, as a thing we're doing right now, integrated math could be a sheltered class, and some high schools do that. So the goal for that second bullet would be, we have math teachers that want an EL endorsement. That will help us meet the literacy KPI by having more teachers that are also certified in EL. And the staffing piece, too.
How hard is it to get EL math teachers?
Very hard.
Okay.
So we have one program right now called the Recently Arrived Program, EL's program, and it's at Glencliff and Overton. And we have to have a teacher that's both EL certified and math certified and is like a needle in a haystack every single year trying to find the person.
So we have one.
There might be others. There are a couple, but it's most people aren't looking for both because they just can't find it. But for us, it's very difficult. So the last piece that I just want to say is that as our population is growing across Davidson County, we just want to make sure that you promote our wonderful EL students and their families and all of the assets they bring to your communities, and know that they are so excited to be here. So when they come in our office, that's the best thing about our job, is being able to greet new families. And so I'm excited to have them working in your schools and being there and being a part. So thank you.
Thank you, Molly. Before we go on, let's take 5 minutes or so and ask questions while we have this fresh on our minds. Yes, go ahead.
So how much does it cost for a math teacher or English teacher to get an EL certification, and how long is the process?
So depending on where you go, you're looking at probably about $1,500 a course, and it's around 4 classes. Now, the good part about what the state does is we are allowed to have a waiver process for teachers that as they're getting the endorsement, but they have to get started. And the state has actually made that a little bit more stringent for us. So.
And that's a regular semester, like a college semester, or like what's the time?
So the state allows you up to 3 years to complete it as you're on a waiver.
Okay.
So you can stretch it out, but financially, that's the hardest part. Teachers want to do it, and they're ready, but the financial part of how much they're paid now, and then you're asking me also to add on the EL endorsement is a tough ask for schools.
So if you had the perfect life and you could do both, so you're taking about a year and a half to do all 4 courses?
Yeah.
I'm assuming you're taking 1 course per semester.
Manageable load for a teacher, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So let's say that I am 7 through 12 math certified. Could I be deemed highly qualified and receive the EL endorsement, or is it a separate praxis test and coursework for the EL endorsement?
Separate praxis tests and coursework.
So let's say that I'm EL certified. I was having the same thing. I could not be highly, oh goodness.
It's really hard. Tennessee's standards for EL endorsement, it's incredibly difficult. You have to do a standalone program, and you have to pass the praxis.
So is that what you're asking us to advocate for, more fluid pathways like that to be
That is one,
deemed?
yes.
Okay.
Another piece would be looking at a budget, not this year, maybe future years, is we've got to carve out some funding to be able to endorse our own folks.
Right.
So that we can grow our population based on who's in our schools right now. The teachers in K-12, you're teaching both literacy content and language development. So we have literacy experts in our schools right now that if we were to add on the EL endorsement, they become really powerful EL teachers. And having the EL endorsement alone is harder because you don't have the literacy background. So it's really great if they're both. It's very difficult to find that in high school.
And it sounds like you all have done a good job of actually engaging with teachers with boots on the ground and asking them what they need. And so am I hearing you right that they're just asking for more help in teaching kids to read? Like not so much focused on what the curriculum is, but just best practices, supports, resources?
So we have, so yes, we've gotten feedback along the way. The biggest piece, the feedback that they have is mostly from content teachers. So those are teachers that are English teachers in a middle school all the way to an ELA teacher. I have an English learner in my classroom. What does the language instruction look like? I understand what literacy practice looks like, but how do I teach the student also the English language when the student comes in December? So we have a really small team of coaches, and so what we're trying to do is build the literacy coaches and other folks in the building to be able to say, well, actually, I know what to do. And so then I can help you if you're that content teacher.
Gotcha.
But that is the greatest need right now that we continue to hear is specifically around newcomers. I have a newcomer. Student is a level 1 English learner. They're in my biology class. What do I do? That's why it has to be this collaborative effort. In order for us to really move the needle, they have to have equal access. We can't water down the content. Same content with language instruction.
Thank you.
Yep.
How much does it cost so they have to take additional practice, correct? How much does that cost to take the exam or take?
Those are like $700, aren't they?
A couple hundred.
A couple of hundred?
So that $1,500 per course does not include the additional
Yeah.
practice?
Yeah.
So, okay.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yep. So Ty and I are going to take the next 20 minutes to talk specifically about students with disabilities and how we're making differences in the area of literacy. Whenever we talk about students with disabilities, we want to start with what that means, because I think we all have a different view when we talk about that subgroup. But it's important to know that we serve over 10,000 students in our district with IEPs, and we start at age 3, and students stay with us until their 21st birthday if they choose to. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act recognizes 13 disability areas. In the state of Tennessee, we have 2 additional disability areas, gifted and functionally delayed. This graph represents the percentage of students in each of the federally recognized disability areas. As you can see on our graph, our largest population that we serve are students with learning disabilities, specifically in the area of reading. Sorry. We have aligned our department's KPIs with the district KPIs and made them specific to students with disabilities. One of our department's key performance indicators is that 70% of students with disabilities that participate in all 3 MAP reading assessments will meet or exceed their growth projections by the end of the 2019-20 school year, as measured by the MAP Growth Tracker Teaching Summary Report. When we started looking at the MAP data, we realized that many of our students with disabilities were not being assessed utilizing MAP. So we have made a conscious effort in collaboration with other departments to communicate to schools that all students should be assessing students with disabilities, no matter what their disability is, whether it's a student with an intellectual disability, autism, a learning disability. They should be following and utilizing MAP and following the MTSS screening process. So this is discussed during inquiry cycles. It is discussed when we have our one-on-ones 4 times a year with our principals to make sure that they are utilizing MAP. And this is data from 2018 to current, and it's the percent of students that are screened specifically in literacy utilizing MAP in grades 2 through 9. Our next slide, shows our specific KPI that I've mentioned that's aligned to our district KPI. This graph is separated by elementary, middle, and high school tiers, and it shows the progress students with disabilities are making in meeting their growth projections as measured by MAP reading. We are making progress in this area, but we are not yet where we need to be. We will discuss our detailed plan today on how we will meet this KPI for our students with disabilities. It is important to note on this graph that November 2018 was the month that we allowed accommodations for students with disabilities, and that's why you see such a big spike that time. We offer a full continuum of supports to our students with disabilities in all of our schools. For many of you that have been part of Metro School for many years, you know that we used to have cluster sites, and now we offer a full continuum at all of our schools. In the area of literacy, as Juan and Molly have stated for our EL students, we share the same goal for our students with disabilities. Our goal is to ensure students with disabilities have equal access to grade level content and standards. As part of the MTSS framework, special ed focuses on equitable access to core and increasingly intensive interventions. We are moving to a heavy focus on our department on instruction and intervention for students with disabilities. This slide represents the continuum of services, with special ed being the most intensive intervention on the continuum. Least restrictive environment. Many of you have heard me speak of this before, and we have truly transformed MNPS to ensure that students with disabilities are part of an inclusive culture. We have met the state target for the first time of greater than 70% according to our most recent annual performance report, so that is certainly something to celebrate. The state did not release the overall statewide data for 2018-19, so that's not shown on this graph. So if you're looking for the orange line for 18-19, you won't see it because the state did not provide that. Also, it's important to note, we never know what our target is moving forward. We get the target the same day we get our data. So we were very excited to see that we had met the target. When I started in this role 10 years ago, we were at 30% of our students accessing core for 80% or more of the day, and now we're at 70. So that's a huge celebration. We know in order for our students to be successful, they have to be accessing core. Effective literacy practices for students with disabilities are the same for all students. And the work we do with literacy directly aligns to the district's literacy model. The key to effective literacy instruction for students with disabilities, in addition to providing access and equity to core instruction, is also providing additional research-based interventions to meet the students' individual goals on their individual educational programs. That was a lot of individuals, but just to put it all up, we want to make sure our students are accessing core, they are in core, and they're also getting that intensive intervention that aligns to their IEPs. Our IEPs outline the supports students are provided both in general education and the goals they are being taught during intensive intervention with our special education staff. All of the goals and supports that are outlined in a student's IEP are based on a student's present level of data. I'm going to turn this over to Ty now, who is our Director of Exceptional Education, and she will speak in more depth on our plan of how we're meeting the literacy needs of our students with disabilities and the collaborative work that we're doing with other departments.
Okay, as Debbie said, we have a lot of work to do around equitable access, and Molly talked a lot about the strategies that are being used and incorporating into other trainings. So in order to build capacity to meet the needs of all the learners, we're really working and focusing on integrating with curriculum and instruction and EL department on common strategies that all students should be, or all teachers should be teaching so that the students can have access to core. Traditionally, special education trainings have kind of been separate from the rest of the trainings, and we're really moving in a direction of integrating all of the work. And that has been a lot of our focus this year. In addition to working with the other teams and developing common strategies that will work for all of our learners, we also have equitable access training that is a cohort model. So we got this grant through, it's called the State Personnel Development Grant from the state a few years ago, and it was a special education training on how to provide universal design for learning and differentiation, which would mean that all teachers were trained in order to support all the students. However, what we knew at that time is doing all that training from the special education department was not going to improve access for students because we weren't getting to the right population of teachers. So through the instructional framework, as you guys have heard David present many times, there's equitable pedagogy within there. And in order for students to have equitable access, it was important to take this training and really situate it into the instructional framework so that all coaches were working from the same model to support teachers. That's been a lot of the work that we've been doing. The cohort model that I'm talking about, we have right now 21 schools going through this training. And it includes administrators. The administrator chooses their team, typically a general educator, a special educator, and other professionals in the building that are chosen by the principals. The training runs for a year, again, cohort model. And the way that it's set up is really based on implementation science. So the team comes out, they receive training, they go back to their building, they redeliver with our coaching support. They come back out once again in the winter, they get training, they go back to their building, they and they deliver that training at the school. Then they come back out once again in the spring, and then they go back and redeliver. So it's really built on train, practice, and then bringing that experience back. I would say that we've invested a lot of time and resources in terms of coaching to really, really improve and build the capacity around equitable access. And from those schools, we're definitely seeing some progress, which is exciting. The other thing that we focus on is database decision-making. We have really partnered with the MTSS coaches within the MTSS model, being that we're most intensive, and do a lot of this work through the MTSS quadrants. We used to deliver database decision-making kind of on our own, and we're really working to integrate that work, again, so all teachers can have a better understanding around how to meet the needs of all their learners through database decision-making. And then, of course, because we're the most intensive intervention on our MTSS framework, we provide a lot of support and structure around most intensive interventions and what that looks like in the building. So our coaches work directly with the building on modeling instruction, again, database decision-making, using interventions and supports to really get to what students need to happen. I always like to say, fill in those gaps, or, you know, a filling in the tooth to make it the whole tooth. It's like we're really pushing to really fill in those gaps for students so that they can access the core instruction that's being delivered to them. So along with most intensive intervention, we have, of course, been applying for, sorry, I'm going to do this, as many grants as we possibly can. Nope, I'm going to go back one more time. Sorry, I didn't realize how that was set up. We've been doing a lot of work, like I said, around providing most intensive intervention supports. And so in the district, of course, building administrators and school teams are responsible for looking at their data and determining the needs in their buildings. And then, of course, our responsibility is delivering what it is that they need to meet those gaps that they have. So we have applied for grants from the State Department, really specifically in the area of intervention through the IDA discretionary grants. And for the last 3 years have received those grants. And so then what we did was take that grant money and provide training to all the buildings that identified that they had need in specific areas of literacy. And again, using an implementation science model, we brought teachers in, we trained them, they went back to the building, they're implementing with students, and then they're coming back out. We're working on fidelity of implementation, going in, modeling. And within that model that I'm talking about, the teachers knew up front we were going to be using their data for the students to make sure that what we're doing is working. And so that's what you have here. One intervention in particular that we had applied for the grant for was SPIRE. And SPIRE intervention is really for those students who are identified with the need of explicit phonics instruction. And so this is only one of several interventions that are available. But in particular, this grant, we had to follow these cohorts of students. We had 768 students in this cohort, but because they weren't screened 3 times, we had to take some of those students out. So here you're looking at the results of 594 students so far. This is from spring of last year. So it followed them from the fall to the spring of last year. Within that SPIRE intervention, 68% of the students that were in that intervention met their growth projections. And this was 2 to 4, grades 2 to 4, which although the intervention is really impacting K4 for students with disabilities, we chose 2-4 so we could see what it looked like not only for FAST specifically, but also the MAP growth scores. We want to do a comparison. So what you also see on the screen is those same students that 68% met their growth projections for MAP, 96% of them showed growth in on FAST measures, so our curriculum-based measures. So that really explicit measure of reading and errors for students. So 96% showed positive growth. So with that said, moving forward, we believe that the professional development model that we are currently working to integrate, we will continue to collaborate and integrate all of our trainings. It's definitely our belief the more capacity that we build, the more growth we will see our students obtain through equitable access to Quality Core. We will continue to integrate all of our work with MTSS team. We have wonderful coaches that are working together. Again, we've broken down those silos where EE coaches and MTSS coaches and LTS, EL coaches are really working together to integrate this work. We have been very excited about a lot of the work that's happening. We are offering a summer intensive reading camp for students with disabilities. We did this last year. We got good results. We'll do it this year, hopefully looking to expand that opportunity. We will continue to work with multidisciplinary teams and do the school walkthroughs, the inquiry cycles. Our team's been really integrated in that work and really looking at the school's data and helping them problem solve and really setting up models of support that we can come in and help them based on their needs. We are also working to complete another grant based on our data. The State Department's been very happy with the data that we've been providing, determining that students are really making growth in these interventions that we're working on. So we're also looking to really automate the Infinite Camp. We've been working a lot with data, trying to, and I think that if, as Debbie said, you guys have been on this board for a while, know that we've been really working to try to identify an automated system to look at growth for students, but not just growth, how our interventions or supports that we're providing is whether the students are making growth in that or not. So Infinite Campus is one of the things that we've been working to help automate, to say, here are interventions that students are in, and having the data warehouse and Infinite Campus do their talking so that we can actually determine which interventions are or are not working. Of course, this is of much interest to many people with return on investment, and we want to make sure what we're doing is working. If it's not, then we shouldn't be doing it. So we are continuing to really go down this track of being able to automate and track all interventions to determine whether, in fact, they are or are not working. So what can the board do to help? Support school funding, of course. Support our work for automating data. We showed you one example of one interventions, and we have many depending on what the schools have chosen. We'd love to help the school more with that data so they know what it is they're doing is or is not working in their buildings. And so we're really working to try to automate that. So support for that work is wonderful. Continue to advocate for students and teachers, and support the integration of our work. And so, again, Molly said today we're representing EL and EE and stand together because we are really working hard to integrate all of this work, which is necessary to build capacity. Thank you.
Thank you both. Any questions?
I have a question.
Okay.
So I want to go back to this Aspire intervention. So is that only for students with disabilities?
No, the grant was, however. The buildings choose their interventions. So I'm sure you, I'm not sure if you're familiar, but we did a request for a proposal, I think 2 years ago. And based on those interventions, schools purchase interventions that they believe will meet the needs of their building and their population of students. Yeah.
That's a remarkable
Yeah.
result. 96% of students showed growth
It really is.
because directly correlated to this program.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen a result like that before on an intervention, to that level of success?
We have not done a great job with collecting the data because, we literally have to hand collect all of this data. That's why we really want to push that integration but no, in my experience, no, I have not seen the growth that we are seeing with this. And it's a specific group of students, and I want to make sure, too, this is the intensive intervention. This is outside of core. So students are still accessing core. So, but schools have the opportunity to purchase different interventions that went through the RFP process, and this whole document describes whether they are appropriate for Tier 2, Tier 3, or special education.
So would it be considered a Tier 3 intervention?
I don't know if was it approved for Tier 3? That's why I was just trying to
Aspires
look if it was just special ed,
actually
too.
Tier 2, Tier 3, and special education. Yeah.
Okay.
That's just remarkable results.
Yeah.
So I think it's something that we should explore further. 96% of kids showing growth is,
Yeah.
that's the kind of stuff we need.
And so we have, I just want to reiterate on that as well, is that we are currently in the process of collecting all the data again, and the cohort of students is almost doubled. So I'm really excited. I don't know what the data says yet, but really excited to see.
I'd love to, I'd love to hear.
March.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks.
Spire is a predominantly phonics program, and the assessment is accessing the students' phonics ability. So you would expect to see that what we're teaching, and if kids are getting a steady diet of phonics, that they would do well on the assessment that assesses primarily phonics. My question is, how are the kids learning to read? And phonics is only a small part of learning to read. So do you have, I know in some of our schools, it's not across the district now, but in some of our schools, they assess the TLA, text level assessment. In those schools, as you're thinking about collecting data, if you haven't already looked into this, how are our students with special needs doing on actual text level assessments? Where were they at the beginning of the year? Where are they at the end of the year? What kind of growth do we see in actual learning to read and understanding, comprehending what they're reading?
Yeah, so based on the two measures that we collect at the district level, that's what we're tracking. So FAST measures how fluently a student is reading, which I'm sure you're aware of. And so FAST is a curriculum-based measure, so we're using that. It's nationally normed. And then, of course, we're using MAP to look at the other aspect of how the students would be more generalizing those skills over into an assessment that would require them to read and comprehend and ask questions. But to your specific question around TLA, I'm of the understanding that the schools, some schools still collect that data, and of course, I'm sure they're using it to determine whether they're seeing generalization to TLA or not. We're not collecting that data at this time. We're using nationally normed assessments. So.
When we think about the two assessments you talked about, those are isolated, like the little bits of reading passages. It's not like the opportunity that a TLA gives when they have a book in their hands and they read it from the beginning to the end, and they have a whole passage where they can predict and use the strategies that good readers use. And that's why the FAST Bridge is a very small segment of that, as well as MAP.
Yeah, any assessment, depending on the purpose of what it's being used for. You're correct. We're using it for a certain purpose, and we're really looking for growth. So in terms of measures of growth, we're seeing growth on both of the nationally normed assessments, which would indicate to me that we would see growth in literacy in general.
My request is that as you determine which schools are using the TLA, that you will look at those special needs students to see how they're doing on more holistic text level assessments.
Yep, absolutely.
I had a question about your cohort program. After they go through the year, is there opportunity in the future to go back and refresh kind of their training, their skills, to go back? Is that planned?
The teachers,
Yes.
Do you mean? Yeah, and so that's how we had set the cohort up, was for them to go out, practice, come back, train, and practice. But we do have the coaches, the coaching model, and our instructional coaches are trained on our interventions that we provide, so they can go to the classroom and follow up and provide additional support that the teachers need. And that happens quite frequently. The teachers will be asking questions, and they will email or contact someone, and then we send someone to the building to support. Yeah.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. We appreciate your help. All right, well, we will have a few minutes before we start our 4 o'clock meeting. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
Hey, Mr. Hanson.